right, so now we're going to go right into a panel discussion on hardware and devices. And what we want to try and accomplish in this is something a little different. What I asked the panelists to do is to put together a series of questions as it related to what we're seeing in the marketplace, what you in the industry are having to address as it relates to hardware and devices and where things are going. So we're going to start off as each individual person. You've already heard from Jeff, but we're going to have intros done, and then I have questions, but this is where it gets truly interactive. You don't have to wait to the end. There's questions during the next half hour or so. Please raise your hand and we'll get you those answers. So without further ado, we'll go right down the road.
All right. I am Brad Sherrard, Senior Vice President of Sales for u-blox. u-blox is a manufacturer of chipsets and modules in 3 different technology areas. Satellite-based positioning, so GPS or GNSS, short-range technologies encompassing Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and then cellular modules, running the gamut from 2G all the way up through the current LTE modules and the various standards that you heard about earlier.
Excellent.
Great.
Next.
Great, thanks so much. I'm Michael Finegan. I'm the Director of IoT Business Development for MultiTech. MultiTech is a manufacturer or OEM here in the domestic US. We have a factory in Mounds View, Minnesota. And what we focus on primarily is helping enable folks with cellular-based products as well as long-range RF products. In addition, some legacy technologies such as analog and being able to support those in this breadth of technology to help people enable them for various projects. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Craig Malone. I'm the Executive Vice President of Product Development at ORBCOMM. For those of you who don't know ORBCOMM, ORBCOMM is one of the largest IoT or M2M companies. You know, we have a global presence, and many of you may think of us as a satellite company. We are unique in the fact that we do own and operate our own satellite constellation. But in addition to that, we offer the full IoT stack, everything from chips and modems and devices through connectivity management, device management, application development, and even customized applications. And that's something that I think truly differentiates ORBCOMM as a player in that full IoT stack. Currently we have over 1.6 million subs, and we continue to grow. And as you get to know more about ORBCOMM, I think that you'll find that the comments I just made truly do differentiate us from other players within this space.
Excellent. So, but I am going to start with you since you're on the end and you just finished talking, so I figured to keep going. So one thing about your business, as well as some of the ones that are interested in here, dual mode, tri-mode, different types of technologies being used by a variety of products. You're doing a lot of stuff with shipping containers on a worldwide basis that are also moving to terrestrial. So tell us about your thoughts on dual mode, tri-mode. How many different networks do we really need to track a container or a truck or anything else like that? What are your thoughts around that?
Sure, and it all starts with the use case. So you need to understand, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And although the session is focused on devices, the device is the solution enabling device. And so the first thing in terms of cellular versus satellite versus other short-range technologies is, first thing that you need to consider is your regulatory coverage. And I want to caution everybody that when it comes to coverage of your networks, there is a difference between geographic coverage and regulatory coverage. And that's what drives to the need to have a dual mode solution. For example, cellular. Cellular is a higher bandwidth network. It's a great network to utilize when you're within a cell. But if you're outside a cell, then you're driving for operational efficiencies, or you're just out in maritime situations, just out of cell coverage, or even a case where there's congestion. Those are examples of where you would consider having a dual mode satellite offering, because even on cellular networks, we offer dual mode solutions, and we deploy those, we track those, and on any given day, a device that is mobile could have between, say, 2 to 8 or 9% of their messages won't get sent through the cellular network because they're out of coverage. And so if you're a business that's driving for operational efficiencies, where you're trying to get that last % of operational efficiencies, you have to make a decision. Are you willing to give up that last 2 to 8% of your business, rather than invest in a dual mode solution. You mentioned tri-mode. We are deploying tri-mode devices, and tri-mode for us is cellular satellite plus low energy Bluetooth for short range communication, and we're doing that for various reasons. One is for the short range communication. It allows us to have wireless sensors. It allows us to leverage all of the features of a smartphone or a tablet for commissioning and diagnostics. And we find that this combination of having a portfolio of devices with this combination allows us to meet many different use cases in maritime, heavy equipment, in the transportation space, oil and gas, all of these markets that we participate in. So those are some of the trade-offs that you have to consider when you think about dual mode, tri-mode, or even single mode.
Brad, do you have anything to add on what you guys are doing for various different models of communication needs?
Yeah, because Craig mentioned coverage, both regulatory and geographic, and there's also the cost piece. To transmit data, depending on what technology you use, there is a use cost. You're paying a cell carrier. Cell networks are not necessarily as ubiquitous and seamless for you to move around the globe while there is roaming. There are different standards, different technologies deployed in the way that carriers pop up their networks, and so it's not as seamless. And so having other technologies are needed. And you always, from a use case profile, you want to cost optimize. And so if you can use a free over-the-air technology like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, that's going to be preferred, especially for big data needs like firmware updates, as opposed to heartbeat and status monitoring, which is something typically going to be done more mobile and the true requirement of the use case.
Michael, on this, go, please.
I'd like to introduce a topic or part of this conversation. Craig brings up a really good point. We've got lots of different technologies, and the use case will absolutely drive it. I will say that I'm a big fan of hybrid networks, right? Hybrid networks make a lot of sense. And my previous focus is primarily carrier driven, right? Where it was ubiquitous coverage and predictable and licensed. But I will say this, as we start to add these together, there's a complementary factor that happens in this that we are able to leverage a lot more. Just like the school bus scenario that somebody mentioned earlier, we see a lot of gaps in maybe some of the coverage capabilities, but now we're seeing technology that is coming that makes this hybrid possible, right? And so I see a lot of promise in technologies that a lot of our companies are putting together around system on module, system on chip.
Yeah.
And we're going to see this changing of time to market for these technologies to really kind of mess with your model earlier, Jeff, that says 5,000 or less. We're going to see that, squeeze that down. Yeah. And we're going to see price performance start to come out. And this really comes around this idea of hybrid networks. And so I'm a big fan of it. And then we're going to add hopefully processing into that discussion too.
Processing is one, but
certification.
Certification is a huge topic.
you guys didn't put that together in your questions to me. I'm not sure I had the time for that. But it's interesting you talk about low power and where that whole world is happening. And there's several people in the audience from those companies that are there. What are your thoughts on where that whole industry is going, even the unlicensed spectrum pieces as well? So thoughts on that? Jeff, do you want to start?
Well, as I said earlier, I think this is all evolving in front of us. It's something that it's hard to predict, but it goes back to what we keep talking about over and over again, that's use cases. Really understanding what you're trying to accomplish from a standpoint of your communication linkage. Are you trying to collect a lot of data, a little data, infrequent data? Is it something that's going to be static, or is it going to be mobile, moving around?
Is battery life?
Is it battery life? And there's whole verticals that we haven't even touched yet in the M2M world, let alone the IoT world. And I think the technologies that we're seeing are going to drive competition that's going to change behavior in some of the legacy environments. And that's a good thing, because that's where we're all going to benefit. And that's why, as an OEM, we're building a little bit of everything, right? Because you don't want to place all your bets in one can.
I'd like to add a comment, with the, particularly with ORBCOMM, with our customers that we serve, they have assets that they want to have a telematics solution that will last the life of an asset. 7 to 10 years, in the case of heavy equipment, could be 25 years.
Yeah, no kidding.
And that's one of the things that when you talk about technology evolution or the technology roadmap of the wireless networks, that's something we pay close attention to because we need to be deploying today and have a solution that will last the life of that asset and meet the customer's expectation. And that's where we really leverage the dual mode or the tri-mode because it gives us that network diversity. And even to the price points, we're investing in RF chipsets to have network diversity for satellite networks, a single satellite modem that allow you to communicate on ORBCOMM or the IDP network on Inmarsat satellites so that you're not handcuffed by the technology roadmap and have to go back and do your 2G to 3G swap out. With a dual mode solution, it gives you a certain amount and a lot of protection against technology migration that's driven by other aspects of the cellular market beyond just M2M.
I mean, really, everything in the cell market is first and foremost driven by the cell phones. So the smartphones, the chipsets, the network
the more dual mode they have.
Everything is focused on those, and in the world of the Internet of Things, it's a completely different requirement. And one of the slides that Jeff showed earlier with technologies moving in two opposite directions with LTE specifically, with faster, well, that's also more expensive.
Shorter battery
more power,
life.
and so on. And then the other direction in trying to reduce all of that. Lower bandwidth, lower cost, lower power consumption to be more appropriate for the use case of a connected device.
Right.
It's a good point there, Brad. I mean, the battery is, I think, one of the big focus areas, and we're looking in low power is a huge need right now. And I think we're going to see a lot of the growth projections really come out of this battery-operated solutions that come into play. So low power wide area networking, and we, MultiTech, backs behind a LoRa standard, LoRa Alliance standard to be able to deliver that very tiny data and efficient delivery back up through a cellular backhaul. So this hybrid approach to be able to do this. And of course, we see players doing macro networks. They're good partners, they're good friends, but what we're seeing is an enablement of tiny data into the network, and that tiny data being really relevant towards a much bigger solution.
And so purpose-built.
It's purpose-built.
Yeah,
exactly.
Purpose-built technology for low power, little data.
And it's got, and so therefore the cost of the modules, the cost of the deployment is there, but there still is a need for aggregation and delivery. So that's where we see the hybrid factor.
And this next step is about, well, you said certification, right? So we're talking about that. I mean, oh my gosh, how do we do this? How much money are we spending on certifying products and modules with multiple technologies, multiple spectrum, multiple everything in there? And and since there's no carriers on this panel right now, when you have to go to a carrier to get AT&T certification with one of your chipsets, modules, modems, whatever, what a pain.
Well, there's three pieces to the certification. You've got the government entity, FCC, Industry Canada. Then you have the regulatory body, PTCRB.
Yep.
And then third, you have the carrier certs. And so each carrier has their own requirements. In some cases, it's a very complicated and expensive test program. In other cases, the governmental and regulatory certs are sufficient, and that varies across the world carrier by carrier. And so we certify at the module level, which is what we build. The chipsets have their own certifications and interoperability requirements that are part of all that. And then when a customer makes a device using one of my modules, that device then has to be certified through all these different things. And so, these guys are taking modules and putting them into devices. Those devices have to be certified.
Yeah.
And that pre-certified factor is an important piece to get to market quickly. So it's a build versus buy model, and that's what I think Jeff's model was sharing on this slide there. But although you can't help but want to beat up on the carriers about certification, but it's a It's a regulatory body, right? So I think what's really going to be interesting is as we move to comms or computing on modules, and we start to look at software-defined radios and how those elements come together. And it's already happening in many of the products that are being introduced right now. The question is, how do we go through certification in those things? And how do we mainstream that stuff? Right. I think that's the bigger piece here. So that's going to be a driving of price performance down, and so the benefit is this ecosystem will...
And driving the price of certification down, right? Because it's just getting out of hand. And we would have thought over the years, let's just say the last 5 years, that those associated costs would have dropped significantly in the same vein as some of our modules and chipsets have, right? And it has not happened.
Well, that's the number one learning curve if you've never done cellular before. I don't know how many times at our booth, someone comes up and says, I've done lots of RF. Have you done cellular? No. Okay. Half hour later, you're glassy-eyed and you're wondering what the heck just happened to you.
And he's going saying, I don't have enough money from friends and family to do this.
But that's why it's really important to know where you are in your development cycle, especially if you're doing a first-generation product and you need to get to market and you want to use cellular. Leveraging a product that's already pre-certified at the box or board level is, leveraging someone's reference design that's already done all the work. Has already been certified, makes your life so much easier. Plus, there are a lot of design shops out there, and we all know who they are, and we can help recommend them, that you can hire to do an evaluation, do a pre-cert testing, to doing
some good
all your
board
design,
work.
Yeah, doing everything, all the way to the CM level. So, do your education, learn all the nuances. There's lots of experts that can help you do that. But I think if you've never done cellular, that is the big gotcha.
Yep. I would agree.
But it's a certified module. No, it's
Thank you very much for doing this. As we go on to the next piece.